If people were expecting an apology from the president, they will be disappointed. He is defending his decision to disclose highly classified information to Russian officials. He's been tweeting this morning. As president, I wanted to share with Russia at an openly scheduled White House meeting. Remember, U.S. media was not allowed to it. We only learned about photos from it from Russian media who were allowed at the meeting. He says he had the absolute right to do what he did. Facts pertaining to terrorism and airline flight safety, humanitarian reasons. Plus, I want Russia to greatly step up their fight against ISIS and terrorism. Does this make it okay? Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Jim Himes. He serves on the House Intel Committee. The president legally can declassify information whenever he deigns. Nobody has more unfettered discretion in that regard than he. So, can't be illegal. But do you believe that that explanation he gave is unsatisfying?
Well, it may not be illegal, but it's completely beside the point. Look, if the Washington Post story is to be believed, what happened is that the president gave a lot more information than would typically be given. It might, let's just imagine, because the Washington Post story said that it was locations. So let's just work with that. Let's imagine that the president is describing a building or a neighborhood. These are places that have limited numbers of people, right? So let's just imagine it's a room that 4 or 5 people have access to. Now, all of a sudden, 4 or 5 people are turning up dead, quite possibly. The source for whatever this piece of intelligence was. So that's the sort of close-in issue. Much larger, of course, is the fact that, we rely on cooperation and tips from intelligence services and sources all over the world. And what has now happened is that all over the world, whether it's in China or Hong Kong or Australia or Africa, people are saying to themselves, you know what, I might give a tip that the next day is being discussed on CNN New Day because the president talked about it with somebody who, in this case Russia, doesn't necessarily have an interest in keeping it secret.
Now, we have another situation, as we did with the Comey firing, where there was an initial story that went out, and now the president, in an effort to clarify, seems to be revealing something that may be closer to the truth. With Comey, it was the AG gave us this report, so we did it. And then the president came out and said, I was going to do it anyway. I thought to myself about this Russia situation. It's false. I got rid of Comey. Last night, H.R. McMaster came out, respected general, national security advisor to the president of the United States, and said, story's false. He didn't give up any sources or methods or anything, which isn't the reporting. And some could say he was parsing his words too carefully. But the president this morning isn't saying that. He's saying, yeah, I did it. And it's okay that I did it because I want to help Russia get more involved with ISIS, and it was the right thing to do. He's saying something different. Apparently, yes, it's just a tweet, but this is the way the president likes to communicate most often. It seems like he's saying, I know what I did, Himes. I know why you're concerned about it. I'm not. My interests with Russia are more important than what you're talking about.
Yeah, again, there's all this haze out there. H.R. McMaster, as you point out, enormously respected on Capitol Hill and elsewhere. He came out and he said the president didn't disclose sources and methods. That may be technically accurate. But again, if the Post story is correct and that there were locations described, you might not need to say, hey, Chris in Damascus gave me this information. Our foes can figure that out. But this gets to something larger and much more concerning because it's the same deal as the Comey firing. This stuff happens. The president appears to just go off script, to do something that can have profound implications, and then the White House spends the next couple of days trying to get the story straight. What that tells you is whether it's the promised tax reform plan that people at Treasury were looking at each other and saying, oh my God, what did the president just promise, or the firing of Jim Comey, for which we still have 4 different explanations, or what happened, the story that broke yesterday. This president is sitting in the Oval Office and making snap decisions that are not based on the advice of his people that we see the White House trying to work out in the days that follow. Now, that may not be a huge problem if you've got to go through a legislative process, if the president decides he wants to repeal Dodd-Frank, say, or whatever. But my God, the man has, untrammeled authority with respect to national security in places like North Korea, Iran. This is not the way you want to run national security policy.
So we know the president watches a lot of television, pays a lot of attention to the media. We know he watches the show often. If he's watching it this morning, you know what he's not seeing? Republicans telling him he did the wrong thing and saying that they're going to speak out and they're going to exercise their checks and balances on him. And I'm not talking about anything exaggerated like impeachment. I'm talking about just censure and, healthy, robust debate in our democracy about what to do. Paul Ryan put out a statement this morning that was a throw a two-line statement. The first line of it wasn't even accurate, where he said, we have no way of knowing what happened in that meeting. We know from the reporting they're talking about transcripts. We know from the reporting that the White House wanted to take certain information out of those reckonings of the meeting, those transcripts, because it's sensitive information. They don't want it out there twice. But that's what they're getting from the Speaker of the House. Trump is getting basically muted silence. The GOP isn't coming forward. You need to have both parties for there to be any meaningful reproach here. Seems like it's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, as a Democrat, I'm thinking back just over a year ago when the President Obama, is pounding the table for trade promotion authority for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And the vast bulk of his own party in Congress basically told him to go pound sand, you know. And in fact, didn't just say no, but raised all kinds of hell against the president. Here you have an issue which isn't so much about policy like the trade deal. This is historical, right? I mean, my Republican friends need to think back to moments like Joseph McCarthy and who stood with him and who stood up and showed courage and said, this is not us. Or back to the Nixon administration when that administration was coming apart. A few Republicans who are remembered to this day for their courage and for their standing for the Republic instead of for their narrow interests are celebrated today. And there's an awful lot of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who I hope this morning are asking themselves, do I want to go down as the guy who just sort of went along with you know, really something ominous in American history, or do I want to be known as somebody who stood up and said, I'm putting my country ahead of my party?
And once again, something so unorthodox and so self-serving where Russia is involved, once again casting light on the need for answers in that investigation. Always good to have